Welcome to Pontification Nation. I'm your host, Ricky Skittle, coming to you live, as always, from my mother's basement. And today we are going to talk about the Green New dumpster fire. And we're going to talk a little bit about DiFi, a little bit about the science behind everything that has to do with any of this, and hopefully facilitate a little bit of understanding about the devil in the details of this resolution and how it is truly evil and wants to eradicate most humans from the planet. But first, I do want to thank everyone. You've been coming and supporting me, watching these videos. I truly appreciate it. If you could, come to the landing page, click the big red subscribe button. I've been looking at my minutes. I know there's lots of you out there watching. Really need you to hit the subscribe button in order for me to continue making these videos and move forward and getting this information out to as many people as possible. Thank you so much for all of your support. I truly appreciate it. If you like, you can follow me on Twitter. It's at Ricky_Skittle, at Ricky_Skittle on Twitter. So please subscribe, follow me on Twitter. We're going to get this thing going and we're going to make it great. Now on to Dianne Feinstein. If you haven't seen this video yet, I'm going to link the full, there's an 11-minute video. I watched the whole thing for you, so you don't necessarily have to. I kind of got this from the Daily Caller where it cuts it down into a shorter period of time. We're not going to watch the whole thing, but we are going to watch a couple just so you can get an idea of what's going on here. But these people, first of all, if you haven't seen this, these activists brought a bunch of children, like 10 and 12-year-old kids, into Dianne Feinstein's office unannounced to get her to agree to vote for the Green New Deal. And Dianne is a sitting U.S. senator, the senior senator from California, been in the U.S. Senate for, I believe, 27 years now. And it is just awful that they would send these children in to debate a senator who would pretty much destroy the kids and is 85 years old and doesn't really care that much because she's probably not going to run again. And so it's unfair to the children for these people to have done this. So let's watch a little bit about this.
Buddy?
Hello.
Oh, tell me where you're from.
We are trying to ask you to vote yes on the Green New Deal.
Well, there are reasons why I can't, because there's no way to pay for it.
So she's telling them like it is. There's no way to pay for it, but we need to stop arguing this over money. We need to start arguing about this as an existential threat to our way of life and telling about what it truly is, which is an evil plan hatched by the devil.
Senator, we
Yeah.
need
It's
a
coming.
plan that
Let me just finish. There is no way to pay for what it gets done, so nothing will happen. So you be the judge. You take a look at it. We're going
but
to
we
get you
have
a
come
copy.
to a point where our earth is dying, literally, and it is going to be
Okay, anytime anyone says something that's stupid, you should know never to listen to another word they say. And anytime anyone says literally, and I probably do it too, but it truly means that they're probably speaking in hyperbole. And that's why they have to say literally, because if they didn't say literally, then you would think they were joking.
a pricey and ambitious plan that is needed to deal with the magnitude of that issue. And so we're here asking.
You notice, oh, it has to be a pricey plan. Why does it have to cost a lot of money to solve the problem? Oh, because all the money is going to go to Democrat activist organizations that are going to solve the problem for us, right?
You to vote yes on the resolution for the Green New Deal because that is the only
That
plan
resolution
that is
will
worth.
not pass the Senate.
What is
There we go. The truth. Speaking the truth, DiFi. I agree with nothing that she says except for this.
that stop you from voting yes? Because
Yeah.
even if they vote, you can still vote
can
yes,
still
and it won't
try.
pass, and we can draft a new plan.
Well, I
but-
may do that. We'll see.
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
know.
please vote
But
yes.
it's not a good resolution.
Can we?
You know,
Some scientists have said that we have 12 years to turn this around.
There are no scientists on the planet in their right mind that are serious that have said that. And this is what our children are being taught in school today. Okay, now I get it. They're from the Bay Area, so maybe in your area, these kids aren't being taught this, but this is what's going on in schools.
Well, it's not going to get turned around in 10 years. What we can do
Senator, if
is
this
put
doesn't get turned around
ourselves-
in 10 years, you're looking at the faces of the people who are going to be living with these
Guess what?
consequences.
Now she takes over for the kids. It says, these are the faces of the people who are going to be living with these consequences. Diane has a great response. I have grandchildren. You don't have to tell me about the consequences. I mean, this is one of the most liberal senators in the Senate. And these people have to abuse her to try to get a liberal policy passed. That should tell you something. That should tell you something. But they shouldn't be able to use these children as pawns like this. But they are Democrats, so I guess, you know, Jeffrey Epstein, they use children.
Government is supposed to be for the people and by the people and all
You know
for the
what's
people.
interesting about this group is I've been doing this for 30 years. I know what I'm doing. You come in here and you say it has to be my way or the highway.
My way or the highway, Diane. Gotta love her. Gotta love her. Now we're going to look a little bit at AOC and her press conference announcing the Green New dumpster fire. Here's what I love about AOC is she can talk for 10 hours without actually saying a substantive word during that 10 hours. And this is an example.
Big day for activists all over the country and for frontline communities all over the
What is a frontline community? That is a made-up word. You'll learn more about frontline communities when she talks a little bit more, and I'll chime in.
country. Today is a big day for people who have been left behind. Today is a big day for workers in Appalachia. Today is a big day for children that have been breathing dirty air in the South Bronx. Today is a really good day for families who have been enduring the injustices of drinking dirty water, or who have seen their living rooms being flooded in with the waves of rising sea levels.
Now, did you see that? Like, I'm going to back it up. We're going to watch that just one more time. I want you to watch her face, her expressions, and like what happens. It's almost like she leaves her body for a moment.
Drinking dirty water, or who have seen their living rooms being flooded in with the waves of rising sea levels. And today, I think, is a real.
Now, I'm no expert on anything, but I don't know a single human being, and I know people who live in New York and Florida, California. I don't know a single human being who is sitting in their living room worrying about the waves of the rising ocean that are coming into their living room, unless we're talking about a tsunami or a hurricane or something like that. But usually once the tsunami or hurricane passes, then the water goes back into the ocean where it belongs. Now here she's going to discuss the stakeholders and really kind of let the cat out of the bag on what this plan is truly about.
For our economy, the labor movement, the social justice movement, indigenous peoples, and people all over the United States of America.
That is not anything about climate change. That all sounds like economic policy. So this is a economic policy plan, not a climate change mitigation plan. Yeah, that's right. Look at her. She's so proud of herself.
Because today is the day that we truly embark on a comprehensive agenda of economic, social, and racial justice in the United States of America.
Now, those statements, again, this is what I'm talking about. She said those words, but she said nothing, right? If I wrote a sentence like that in a paper in college, that had a word count, like let's say you had to write 1,000-word paper, right? And I wrote that sentence, the professor would strike that sentence out and fail me if I didn't meet my word requirement, because those are what we call fluff words. They have no meaning. They are there just for nothing. It's fluff. It says nothing. It means nothing. So here she's talking about how this is not a bill, but it is a start to a conversation.
Our first step is to define the problem and define the scope of the solution. And so we're here to say that small, incremental policy solutions are not enough. They can be part of a solution, but they are not the solution unto itself. There is no justice and there is no combating climate change without addressing what has happened to indigenous communities. That means that there is no fixing our economy without addressing the racial wealth gap. That means that we are not going to transition to renewable energies without also transitioning frontline communities and coal communities into economic opportunity as well. That is what this is about. It is comprehensive, it is thoughtful, it is compassionate, and it is extremely economically strategic as well.
Okay, so that is a whole bunch of BS. None of that means anything. First of all, what the heck does indigenous peoples have to do with climate change? Secondly, that last sentence there, the strategic, economically, yada, yada, garbage. That garbage that she's spouting is another set of sentences that my professor in Economics 101 would have slashed through if I had a 1,000-word paper to write, and would have failed me because I used words that really mean nothing but make me sound smart. Guess what? People who use words that have no meaning in the context that they're using them are using them so they can sound smart because they are not smart. AOC is not a smart person. She's not a serious person. The only thing that is serious about her is her Twitter following, if you can call that serious at all. Okay, so here is the propaganda. I'll put this in the notes. Here's the propaganda piece on the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal starts with a World War II type mobilization to address the grave threat posed by climate change, transitioning our country to 100% clean energy by 2030. Clean energy does not include natural gas, biomass, nuclear power, or the oxymoron clean coal. So here, you'll see this a lot. They are comparing climate change to Hitler and the attempt to exterminate the Jewish people from this planet. It is mind-boggling. Really, the people who should be compared to Hitler are the people who write this garbage. Now, on top of that, the Green New Deal largely pays for itself in healthcare savings from the prevention of fossil fuel-related diseases, including asthma, heart attack, strokes, and cancer. One could make a serious argument that all of this stuff has to do with the food supply and has nothing to do with carbon emissions. Moving to 100% clean energy means many more jobs, a healthier environment, and far lower electric costs compared to continued reliance upon fossil fuels. If that were true, it would already be, because capitalism is the greenest thing to ever happen to the world, which is why we, per capita, emit more carbon emissions, but also emit half of the carbon emissions of China. Because capitalism is green by nature, because energy costs money and people want it to be renewable and as cheap as possible. So if studies have shown that the technology already existed to achieve 100% clean energy by 2030, then it would already be being done and we don't need anyone to tell us to do it. That's what markets do. Free markets evolve and advance. It is not a mistake that the world has advanced more in the last 200 years than they have ever in any 200-year period in history, because capitalism. That's why. Because anytime the government tries to control everything, it fails because it can't meet the needs of the people. The only person who can meet your needs is you. Now, the Green New Deal is not only a major step towards ending unemployment for good, it is also a tool to fight the corporate takeover of our democracy and exploitation of the poor and people of color. Our transition to 100% clean energy will be based on community, worker, and public ownership and democratic control of our energy system, rather than maximizing profits for energy corporations, banks, and hedge funds. This is socialism. This is communism. This is Marxism, this is Stalinism, this is Leninism. That's what this sentence is. There is no such thing as community, worker, and public ownership and democratic control. If they tell you the public owns something, go try to... Seriously, we have BLM land. You can pretty much do whatever you want on BLM land. Ask the Bundys, who got shot and killed by government officials. That's what all this stuff is going on out west. That's supposed to be our land. Then why can't we use it for what we want? We need to treat clean energy as a human right and a common good. Again, this is all fluff, junk that is meant to be a veiled socialistic agenda. The Green New Deal will provide assistance to workers in local communities that now have workers employed in the fossil fuel industry and to the developing world as it responds to climate change damage caused by the industrial world. Listen. Assistance to workers in local communities that have workers employed in the fossil fuel industry. You know what that assistance is? Here's your stipend. Here's your food. When there's enough food to give to you, we'll give it to you, unless we're trying to create a political agenda and starve you to death and just eliminate you from the planet because we don't like you. Again, have workers employed in the fossil fuel industry, developing world as it responds to the climate change. They're going to send U.S. money to other parts of the world so that we can fix the problems that we created there. Again, I don't think this is right. Right now, our federal government subsidizes the rich agribusiness corporations in the oil, mining, nuclear, coal, timber giants at the expense of small farmers, small businesses, and our children's environment. We spend tens of billions of dollars every year moving our economy in the wrong direction. The Green New Deal will instead redirect that money to real job creators who make our communities healthier, sustainable, and secure at the same time. So again, instead, redirect that money. They are redirecting the money to the real job creators, our friends who are going to give you the jobs that are going to pay you nothing that you might be able to eat with. This is what all this says. Now, it is important to remember why the federal government subsidizes all of these areas. It's because we went away from demand-based farming a long time ago, thanks to FDR, a Democrat. If you listen to my Goldwater Reagan speech, he talks about how the farmer subsidies, they arrested a farmer and made him sell his farm because he grew too much rice. They already have all these controls in, and they were Democrat implemented controls. Guess what? We would be better off if we had local farms that grew local food and supplied their local communities. But we don't have that because of the Democrats. We have corn in our gas because the Democrats. We're trying to work out a deal where China will buy more agriculture products for us because we produce more stuff than we could use in our country. Why don't we just focus on producing the food that our country needs? And if we have surpluses, then focus on selling that. Donald Trump, it's actually in his agenda. It's going to be a second term thing. But it's in his agenda to do demand-based farming at a local level. So these people are just, taking Trump's agenda away. Not really, but, for real. Now let's talk about carbon emissions. First of all, just remember, what is the building block of life? You learned this in biology when you were a kid. Carbon. Without carbon, we wouldn't be here. Without carbon, there is no life. So don't let them think that carbon is some awful thing. The reason carbon gets emitted when we burn fossil fuels is because those fossil fuels were made of carbon when they were alive, and there is carbon trapped inside of the liquid that they became over millennia of molting in the earth. Now, global carbon emissions from 1900 to 2014. So let's just assume that, 1 billion metric tons of carbon is our baseline without human activity or significant human activity. The other thing I want you to notice about this graph is every single recession is accompanied by a reduction in carbon emissions. So let me tell you, reducing carbon emissions will destroy economies. Now, it's not necessarily to say that reducing carbon emissions will destroy the economy, but anytime the economy gets destroyed, carbon emissions go lower because it's less productive. That's why carbon emissions are up right now, because the American economy is doing very well. So looking at this, let's say it's, 1 billion metric tons is our baseline. And right now we do 10 billion a year, probably a little more because this is from 2014. Now, who emits all of that? The United States emits 15% of it, China 30%, all the other countries 30%. the EU, India, the Russian Federation, and Japan. I mean, we're let's say we eliminate this 15%. Let's say we go to zero. Is China going to go to zero, or all these other countries going to go to zero? Is everyone else going to do the same thing we're doing? No. They're going to take our money and laugh at us like they've been doing for the last 100 years. That's why he got out of the Paris Agreement. We're the only people who are actually beating our targets in the Paris Agreement. Everyone else who signed on to the Paris Agreement is not beating the targets. We are, because capitalism. So these are the countries that are the main problems, right? China and India are almost half of the carbon emissions in this world. And they're not going to be decreasing their carbon emissions. So here it gives you a breakdown of the carbon emissions, so from fossil fuel and industrial processes, 65% of the emissions are from that. So even if we eliminate fossil fuel and industrial processes, there's all this other stuff that's still going to be emitted into the atmosphere. And guess what? The plants need the carbon dioxide to breathe. The earth is a living, breathing thing. And it has been around for a lot longer than humans. And it will continue to be around a lot longer after humans. That's just a fact. Now we look here where all this stuff comes from. Energy and heat production, agriculture, forestry, and other land use. So if we reduce our carbon emissions, you can't heat your house, you can't have electricity, you can't eat, and you can't go burn wood. I mean, seriously. Is that what you want? If that's what you want, then this is what you want. These are who you should be voting for, and this is who you should be supporting. Okay, so we got to get a little sciencey here, and for the record in the comments, I don't know how many people are going to watch this, but I'm not trying to have a debate about God, the existence of God, creation, evolution, any of that stuff here. I'm not going to give you my opinions on any of that stuff. So just for the sake of this conversation, we're going to talk about the science and math of all of this, because that's what this is about, science and math, right? According to them. The Earth is 4.5 billion with a B years old. We're talking, the data that we have on this stuff is like 100 years old and arguably highly manipulated to present the data that they want to present to achieve their goals. Arguably. We're not going to have that argument now, but arguably. So, 100 years for a 4.5 billion year old thing is like blowing your nose. It's not even blowing your nose. It is the thought of I have to blow my nose. The nanosecond, right? So that's where we're at. So we're going to take 100 years of data and say that this means everything, and then in 12 years the world's going to end because it's been around for 4.5 billion years, been hit by meteors. Everything has changed on this planet. It says right here it was covered in molten lava. There wasn't even water 4.5 billion years ago. It was unrecognizable. It was uninhabitable. Okay? So that's Earth. Now, let's talk about Earth again as a living, breathing organism who wants to be in homeostasis. So first of all, 3/4 of the Earth's surface is covered by oceans, 90% of which we have no idea what goes on inside of or at the bottom of because they're miles deep and we can't get there and we don't even truly understand anything about the Earth or where it came from or how it got here or why it's like it is. It is a metaphysical, philosophical debate that has been going on since the beginning of humanity. So for anyone to say that they could tell that over the last 100 years, that the next 12 years, the Earth is going to end and people aren't going to be alive anymore, they are disingenuous at best. Most likely, they're liars and intentionally lying. Just how much don't we know about the Earth? Well, in February of 2017, we discovered a new continent under New Zealand. We don't know anything about the Earth. We truly don't. We try to understand it, but we didn't even know there was a whole continent under the island of New Zealand. The Earth used to look like this. Pangea, it used to be one big block. And then it's slowly separated over time. The Earth isn't going to look the same in 1,000 years. It is just totally disrespectful to people's intelligence to say that we fully understand the Earth and how it operates. Okay, now back to how much carbon we're emitting into the atmosphere on an annual basis, 10 to 12 billion metric tons. Now, I have a theory, and it was given to me by a physics professor when I was in high school. If you look at the history of the Earth, over the last 100 years, the Earth has, what man has emitted, the Earth has taken in a large amount more than that from volcanic activity and other types of things to happen to the Earth over a long period of time, hundreds of thousands of years, etc. But looking at it, so let's look at a few eruptions and see what they did to the Earth and then reconcile that with this graph. And since we're on the subject, going back to what we don't know about the Earth, everyone thought that Mount St. Helens was an inactive volcano until 1980. So again, scientists don't know anything about what they claim to know for a fact. They just don't. It's not knowable. It's not knowable. In any case, in fact, even if we include the rare, very large volcanic eruptions like 1980's Mount St. Helens or 91's Mount Pinatubo eruption, they only emitted 10 and 50 million tons of CO2 each, respectively. It would take 3 Mount St. Helens and 1 Mount Pinatubo eruption every day to equal the amount that humanity is presently emitting. I love how they go to things like this. Again, first of all, after Mount St. Helens erupted, they didn't think there was going to be life in the blast area for decades. And within a year, there was already plant life growing, and they were fascinated and amazed by that because we don't understand the Earth. The Earth is much stronger and more powerful than humans and dinosaurs and anything else that's ever walked the face of it. It will continue to be here. No matter what happens, people should adapt and overcome. There may be a very wide, large population burning off of the Earth, that the Earth just, something happens where a bunch of people die. A mass extinction, if you will. But not everybody's going to die. But now I see why the liberals think this way. Because I guarantee you, there isn't a liberal in a city that could go out in the wild and survive for much longer than a couple of hours. They would freak out and wouldn't be able to do it. And then guess what? The only people left would be the middle America people who can actually survive for a little while without heat and all of the things that we have that make this world a wonderful place to live. Now, since the scientists like to refute the theory that volcanic activity has emitted more carbon into the air than humans will ever emit, with volcanic eruptions like Mount St. Helens and Mount Pinatubo because they were large, let's look at some supervolcanoes. So if anyone's unfamiliar with what a supervolcano is, it's a very, very large volcano that sits underneath the ground. It doesn't really look like a volcano, but there's a bunch of molten stuff, and they call them really calderas. The term supervolcano is just for easily digestible information, but really, it's a large magma chamber that releases itself every few 100,000 years. So, the last major eruption at Yellowstone, some 640,000 years ago, ejected 8,000 times the ash and lava of Mount St. Helens. Now, for those of you that are following along, I did the math. 8,000 times the emissions of Mount St. Helens is 80 billion metric tons of carbon. That's 80 billion. So if we're under the assumption that human activity is 10 billion a year at this point, and maybe over the period of those years, let's say it's about, 100 billion metric tons in the last 100 years. 80 billion from the last time Yellowstone erupted. Now, that's all in a short period of time. The Earth has been adapting and changing to our carbon activity over the last 100 years because the Earth desires to be in homeostasis. Now, the Long Valley caldera, which is in California, the last time it erupted, 2,000 to 3,000 times as much lava ash and emissions as Mount St. Helens. That's 30 billion metric tons. That's half of the carbon emissions over the last 100 years that human activity has created. So the Earth is a living, breathing thing. It wants to be in homeostasis, and it will continue to be in homeostasis. And if it's not, something will happen, like a mass extinction event of the human population, that will help the Earth come to homeostasis. So, while there may be concerns that human life will not exist as we know it, it's disingenuous to say that the Earth is going to die because of human activity. The Earth will continue to be here long after humans are. And I would assume even in a mass extinction event with 6 point some billion of us on this planet, someone is going to survive. Hopefully one man and one woman will at least survive so that the species can continue. It probably won't be many liberals surviving, though, because I don't think that they're going to be out in the woods killing things and eating them, and they're going to understand what berries to forage and what root vegetables they can eat without being poisoned. Now, I'm getting close to my time. So we'll do this, then I'll kind of give you a little synopsis, and we'll close out for the day. But this is the hubris of man. We are so arrogant to believe that we have some ability to impact the Earth's existence. We are nothing but a shit stain on the underwear of the Earth when you look at the long run and how long things have been going on this planet without us. And if we aren't here, they will continue to go on. We still have dinosaurs and alligators and crocodiles. We have cucarachas. Things live through mass extinction events. The problem with the dinosaurs, whether it was overpopulation, a meteor, whatever way you want to look at it, they didn't have the ability to critically think, adapt, and overcome to ensure that their species survived. But that's the difference between a dinosaur and a human. We do have the ability to I guess some of us have the ability to critically think, adapt, and overcome. Not all of us. But let's look at what the Earth has been doing behind our back without us knowing and understand how freaking arrogant we are. Scientists discover enough new forests to cover 60% of Australia. A new survey of the world's dryland habitats has found a massive amount of previously unreported forests, 467 million hectares, over 1.1 billion acres, which is 45% more forests than found in past surveys. The newly discovered dryland forests cover an area equivalent to 60% of the size of Australia, putting dryland forest extent on par with tropical rainforest and boreal forests. The discovery could be good news for reversing global warming as it increases the estimates of total global forest carbon stocks by 15 gigatons to 158 gigatons, an increase of 2% to 20%. So, this is the arrogance. We think that we discovered this. Scientists are so arrogant that they think that they discovered this forest cover. I would posit to you that the Earth, as a living, breathing organism, realized that it had more carbon than it needed, and then more plants grew so that they could take the carbon out of the air. It's as simple as that. If there is an abundance of carbon in the air, more plants are going to grow, because the living, breathing organism that is the Earth, that has been here for 4.5 billion years, wants to achieve homeostasis. It knows, the earth knows where it needs to be. The earth knows where it needs to be. Now, this article is from 2017, and not one human being on the left in the globalist climate change agenda world would ever tell you this. And not only would they never tell you this, they have the audacity and the arrogance to think that we just discovered it. Is it possible that it wasn't there when you looked before and it grew because the earth needed to recycle some carbon out of its atmosphere? Is that possible? I would argue that that is probable. And that is what happened. Because God created the earth, and there is a reason why medicine has historically always come from plants. There is a reason why all of this stuff works. It's because nature is perfect. We are imperfect. And nature, even if it means burning the human cancer off of the planet, will survive. Now, I don't want to sit here and argue that there will be some mass extinction event or anything like that. But I promise you this, there will be homeostasis on the earth, whatever way that comes and whatever way it looks like. The earth is not ending in 12 years. The whole Green New Deal is about control of our economic resources and your life. They don't want you to think for yourself. They don't want you to create for yourself. And they don't want capitalism. Me personally, I like thinking for myself. I like creating for myself. I like capitalism because capitalism works. And guess what? Capitalism will eventually solve the problem of carbon emissions because that's what capitalism does. It solves the problems. The problem is when corrupt governments interfere in capitalism, like in the farming system, like in the banking system. That's where disparity comes from the government moving the levers and trying to rig the game for an anticipated outcome. We cannot control outcomes, we can control inputs and hope for the desired outcome. If the desired outcome doesn't happen, you need to be able to have control over the inputs so that you can get the desired outcome. There is nothing on the planet that guarantees an outcome. Anyone who tells you that they're going to guarantee an outcome either has the system rigged or is God and can tell the future. I just want you to think about this long and hard. We all love the environment. Everybody wants everyone to have access to clean water. Everyone wants everyone to have access to health care. It's a fallacy in this country to say that you don't have access to health care. Anyone can walk into any emergency room and they won't be refused service. Now, granted, that's not the best way to go about it. I'm sure we can improve upon that. We can be better. Of course we can. But let's make it our choice, our decision to be better. Let's look at ourselves individually and think about what we can do to be better to our fellow man and to our environment. Because collectivism and collectively, you can't do anything. You know why you can't do anything? Because when there is a collective, there are people who don't do what they're supposed to do, which is why the Paris Climate Agreement won't work. Because China's not going to do what it's supposed to do in the climate agreement. It's just going to take money. India's not going to do what it's supposed to do in the climate agreement. It's just going to take money. That's why collectivism doesn't work, because there's always going to be a bad actor because of, that silly thing called human nature. I wish it weren't that way. I wish we didn't have people who wanted to be bad actors, who want to destroy things. I wish we didn't have people who wanted to control everything and tell you that they're not. But we do. Until we wake up and start worrying about it at an individual level, none of this matters. Because they'll take over and they'll run it all into the ground, most likely after they take the guns. And then we'll all be sitting here in Venezuela trying to get something to eat and wondering how it all happened. For Pontification Nation, this is Ricky Skittle, and I'm out.